Hey, what's going on guys? It's your boy, Nerd Mode On, and welcome to a Battlefield 4 video, and today I'm actually going to be talking with you guys a little bit about World War I, considering that Battlefield 1 will actually be set during this time period. Now, I think it was a really good move on the Battlefield franchise to go back to the past, considering that there's a lot of historical events that would really amplify the story mode, which in many cases is one of the lacking features that the Battlefield franchise has had over the last few titles. The Battlefield franchise has really never been known for its single-player campaign, which is really unfortunate considering that I find many of them to have really cool moments in them, but unfortunately they're just not able to capitalize on keeping your attention and making it memorable. Now with that said, World War I is going to be focusing heavily on the three types of combat that are traditional of the Battlefield franchise at the moment, but of course they're going to be making some slight differences in order of how they're going to be going about it and the available technology of the time period. Now, the three types of combat situations that a player might find themselves in is going to be aerial combat, sea combat, as well as ground combat, may that be using a tank or, on the opposite side of the spectrum, just running around being an infantry player. Now, since Battlefield 1 doesn't have the technology that is available from today's standpoint, we're not necessarily going to be having helicopters in a traditional manner. I mean, a lot of the gameplay that you guys have been seeing, as well as myself, has been from planes that are traditional of the time period. Now, since World War I began on July 28th of 1914, unfortunately the first practical helicopter was not created until September 14th, 1939, which is 25 years after World War I began. Now, the first practical helicopter took flight at Stratford, Connecticut, and was named the VS-300. Now, this helicopter was developed at the Aircraft Division of the United Aircraft Corporation. Now, if we take a look at the VS-300, you might notice that it does look a little bit more practical in terms of what you might expect from a helicopter of today's standards. Now, of course, there are some slight deviations considering that this particular helicopter was created in 1939, and the new top-of-the-line helicopter that we have today is a lot different in comparison to what this one may look like. Now, of course, it is worth noting that we've only been talking about the first practical helicopter. The VS-300 does fit into the first practical helicopter that was created. However, there is the first operational helicopter that was created in 1936. Now, the first operational helicopter that was created was named the FW-61. Now, if we take just a moment to take a look at the FW-61 as well as the VS-300, when it comes down to the title of aircraft that they don't necessarily have a very aggressive kind of sounding name to them, unfortunately. If you're anything like me, when you think of a helicopter, you think of the Apache helicopter with all of these really cool attributes and has the destructive capabilities to level a city in a matter of minutes. So, of course, there is some neat things that are associated with today's helicopters, but it is also really neat to see where we started at when it comes down to our first operational helicopter as well as the first practical helicopter. So of course a transformation in terms of the general appearance has definitely been made, as well as the arsenals that have been attached to these aircrafts. So when it really comes down to it, I just wanted to kind of let you guys know from a historical standpoint of where we kind of began, and to realize that helicopters really haven't been around for very long. I mean, they're still really new when it comes down to what they can be, as well as what has been done to them over the last 50 years. What even makes this topic even more interesting is that a lot of the concepts for a helicopter have been around since ancient China. You can go back and look at articles that talk about Chinese toys that had the ability to fly up slightly, but of course they weren't as necessarily animated as they are today. But with the limited technology of the era, they weren't necessarily able to facilitate a helicopter as early as what we have today. And of course, the helicopters of today really depend heavily on technology and an understanding of how to advance it even further than it already is. So while World War I is going to focus heavily on the three types of combat that we talked about, it's going to be interesting to see how aerial combat is going to be altered from its original standpoint from Battlefield 4. I mean, obviously in Battlefield 4, we have some pretty cool vehicles that are available, and of course this is stuff that you can actually use in real life. Even when you take a basic understanding of Battlefield 4 and sit back and realize that it's not necessarily designed to be a milsim, it has a lot of aspects of reality that are missing, but of course it does have some great arcade moments that are sprinkled in there to try to amplify the gameplay and make it a lot more interesting for players. Even if you look at the customization for the attack helicopter, I mean, obviously a lot of the arsenal that is attached to an attack helicopter depends heavily on the technology of the time period. You have stuff ranging from Hydra rockets to Zuni rockets all the way to smart rockets, which really depend heavily on technology, considering that they do guide themselves to the target, especially when it comes down to a video game form. In World War I, you wouldn't necessarily have any of this technology. I mean, of course, you could drop bombs, and they wouldn't necessarily be like today's standards where they kind of guide themselves to the target, so there is a huge difference even there. And Battlefield 1 is going to have a bomber, which would necessarily facilitate what I just spoke about. Even if you continue to look at Battlefield 4, when it comes down to the secondary weapons that are available, you have heat seekers as well as the Tau guided missile, which is something that you specifically guide all the way to the target. So while Battlefield 1 is very unlikely to have a helicopter or anything that's necessarily going to facilitate that type of gameplay, it's really cool to see kind of where we began and to look at Battlefield 4 and realize that we're kind of giving up some of the vehicles that we've become very acquainted with. Due to the limitations of the time period, I feel like we're going to definitely see a lot more strengthening between these three major types of gameplay when it comes down to aerial, infantry combat, as well as the sea combat, and I feel like a lot of this is really going to amplify the battlefield and ultimately just allow everybody to have a little bit more of a strategic approach to how to take objectives. Battlefield 1 seems to be really pushing for team play, which is an initiative that was originally going to be for Battlefield 4, but a lot of the ideas and concepts were scrapped at the last minute. So in Battlefield 1, we're really going to be pushing for the objective again, and it's really going to be great to see a lot more players trying to facilitate these type of playstyles that are necessarily going to assist the team and not hamper the performance of everybody on the battlefield. So while Battlefield 1 may have some limitations due to the technology that was available of the time period, we're definitely going to be seeing an amplification of the overall playstyles that will be available and permitted on the battlefield. But anyway, guys, I really just wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about helicopters, give you guys some historical information, and talk just a little bit about Battlefield 1 and some of the overall concepts that are going to be changing from Battlefield 4 all the way back to World War I. But until the next episode, guys, this has been NMO, and I'm going to be signing out, guys. Peace!